So I decided to complete my first living dex in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Earlier in the year I decided that it would be fun to complete a living dex in Paldea. How hard could it be, I thought. And so I did, over the course of a couple of months of playing the game on and off. After completing the living dex, I decided to purchase the DLC and complete that living dex as well, which leads us to this video. Before I get further into the video though, I'd like to ask that you leave a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It was some pretty hard work to finish this Kitakami Living Dex and I appreciate the support. So with all of that out of the way, let me take you on my journey of completing the Kitakami Living Dex. As mentioned before, I had already completed my main Paldea Living Dex, which led to me having to make a crucial decision. The decision was whether or not I should fill the dex with repeat mons. What I mean by this is, should I recatch Pokemon that were already in the original Paldea Pokedex, or should I just fill it with the new Pokemon that show up only in Kitakami? As some Pokemon from the Kitakami Dex were already present on the mainland, therefore taking up like 100 extra slots in the Pokedex. I ended up deciding not to do repeat mons and only fill up the dex with new mons, which helps not only save time, but it also allows me to save up in box space that I'll need for the inevitable Indigo Disc Living Dex. Alright, so with that figured out, we can map out a route. I'm doing air quotes, you can't see the air quotes, but I'm doing air quotes when I say route. I decided to just start in Pokedex order, but before I did that, I went ahead and got the version exclusives out of the way. The only 4 we have here are Cramorant, Gligar and Gliscor, Aipom and Ambipom, and then finally Morpeko. To get these mods, I just booted up Pokemon Home and transferred them into my box and waited, keeping them in the PC until it was time to put them in order. Now with those guys out the way, now we can go into Pokedex order. Alright, let's get started with Pokemons 1 through 30. It's actually pretty simple. A majority of the Pokemon in the first box are all in this first area. Not only that, but most of them are only 1-stage evolutions, so I only had to catch a pair or just one of them, since I had caught a couple while playing through the DLC casually. Though of course that would have been too simple. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have a day and night cycle. Each day and night cycle is roughly 30 minutes long, and of course some Pokemon only spawn during the day and some only spawn during the night. The first day and night cycle Pokemon that gave me trouble in this run was Volbeat. This thing took me about an hour to find alone, just because I started during the day, had to wait till nighttime, and when it turned nighttime I still couldn't find one, so I had to wait for a whole nother cycle. Eventually I found one and that was that, so you know, everything was good. Then I remember Friendship Evolution existed and I thought it would be bad, but it was actually easier than the day and night cycle Pokemon. The example I'm going to use of Friendship Evolution is Swadloon, since it's the first one. So how exactly do you evolve by friendship as fast as possible? Well, you simply just use the EV berries. So the EV berries are special, as instead of doing something like healing you or boosting your stats in a pinch, these berries reduce your EVs by 10 points, making them the direct opposite of the vitamin items that boost your EVs by 10 points. But what does this have to do with friendship? You're probably asking, right? Well, let's read the description. It reduces stats and makes your Pokemon friendlier towards you. So with that, all we have to do is use a ton of these berries, which you should have a good amount of these if you've been doing raids since the game first dropped, or if you know how to easily farm them by just resetting your clock and going to the auction over and over and over again until you have hundreds of berries. I mean, that's not how I did it, but it's definitely a valid option. So, you know, I just dumped like 100 berries in the Swadloon, used the rare candy, and boom, easy leave ending. Nothing to it. And this is how the others will be handled going forward. So after that, we continue onward, catching the Rabombi line, the Arbok line, the Victory Bell line, and then we pause to go over to that one shack where they get the syrupy apples, catch this one terrestrialized Applin and evolve it into Dipling, catch Vulpix, Ninetales, and then finish it off with the Poliwrath line. Kind of. But here's the box 1. It's complete, and we only had like 2 minor setbacks. Things are going pretty good so far, so let's get to box 2. Pokemon 31 through 60. Right off the bat, we have an issue. Politoed. So just a couple of seconds ago, I said we only sort of finished the Poliwrath line, and I said that because now we have to deal with Politoed. Now, it may sound like I'm over exaggerating, but it took me like 2 hours to find this thing. And you may be scratching your head as to why, when the internet nowadays is so easy to access and I can easily find a trade partner or some alternative. But really, it just kind of happened to be a series of unfortunate events. First, my friend who has the game just so happens to be busy while I'm doing this challenge, and he won't be back till later the next day. Second, I actually had a Politoed in my sword box, but because I was doing this the day before Indigo Disc is supposed to drop, it just so happens that Pokemon Home was shut down for an update that wouldn't finish until the next day, which made me pretty mad because I started box 2 like a day after box 1, so I had access to Home and then boom, I just didn't, right, just one day later. And then lastly, RNG just wasn't on my side, man. I got super unlucky with the raid pools. But with the raid pools being my only option and the other options being off the table, it was time for me to just keep on resetting and resetting and resetting. And then boom, I found a 6-star raid Politoed. So I pulled my RCS out, tore him a new one, and boom, now we have Politoed and we can continue with the rest of the box. Things get a bit easier from here with Hoot. I just had to wait until nighttime again, and for Apom and Ambipom, I just took the ones that I transferred from home earlier and put them in their designated spots. Must-Find and Shift Tree lines were easy enough to find, and you'd think there'd be more trouble with the Trevenant line, but there's a guaranteed Terra spawn in the forest, so there was no need to trade it. Then Sinistcha is pretty common, so there was no problem there either. The Golem line could have been a problem because it was another trade evolution that at that moment I didn't have access to transfer from anywhere else. But before I bought the DLC, I was hunting for Herba Mysticas, and Golem happens to be a Pokemon that can drop those. So even though I didn't have the DLC, I was looking online, seen a Golem raid, and then boom, I got it, caught it. I didn't get any herbs from it, but you know what? It's fine. We got the Golem for the Dex, and that's all we really care about. Same thing with Conkeldurr actually. Only difference is I wasn't hunting for Herba Mystica specifically. I just knew that it was a trade evolution that I might not have the chance to get normally unless I got lucky with raids, and it was just a good time. I was like, it's a raid, let me do it and let me catch it because it's a trade evolution. That's usually how I operate. If the evolution method is kind of hard, even though I didn't know I was doing a living dex, if the evolution method is hard or like something I don't feel like doing, just catch the raid so I don't have to do it myself, you know. So boom, I had an extra Conkeldurr laying around. Next is a Morpeko, which of course I transferred from Sword earlier because it's a Violet exclusive and I wouldn't have been able to get it anyways. And then we got Munchlax and Snorlax, which are really easy because they both have set spawn locations. The Munchlax can be found just from like a Terra spawn in the beginning area, and then Snorlax has that cave he's blocking. The last 6 mons were pretty easy. All I had to do was catch the Ludicolo line, their Probopass line, and a single Grubbin. And with that, box 2 is finished. This is what it looks like. Aside from the Politoed, this one was light work, so with that, on to the next one. So this is when things start to get pretty annoying, and this box definitely took me the longest because of a few Pokemon. There was one in particular that really pissed me off, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just start from 61. To start off, we just had to finish the Vikavolt line that we started in the previous box by catching 2 more Grubbin, which is easy enough since they're pretty common in the area. Now, we shift over to this rocky area to catch a single Sandshrew, and we finish off the Sandslash line by using a Sandslash I found during the main story. For Gligar and Gliscor, I take the ones I got from home and then we slot them in. The Mandibuzz line took me a little second to find because I was trying to find them based on their general spawn locations, but I had no luck. So I looked at the Cerebi map for fixed locations, and it turns out that Volibee is guaranteed to spawn in a couple of set locations. So I just used 2 of those to my advantage, and that's how I caught them. I did the exact same thing with the next line of Pokemon. For the Komodo line, I looked at the fixed spawn locations on the Cerebi map, caught my 3 Jangmo-Os, and that was that. So then we do a little dance with the Pokédex order. So we climb up the mountain to go get the Coughings, go down the mountain to get the Mienshao, then go on the other side of the mountain to get the Duskull line. Hey, so this is editing the Kruma here. I didn't do all this. This is the wrong order. I was looking more at the Pokédex order than I actually was the footage, so I said some stupid shit that wasn't true. So yeah, back to the video. Speaking of which, the Duskull line kind of got on my nerves because it says that Duskull was on the cliff area near the forest, but after looking around for a while, I couldn't find a single one. So I ended up using a Ghost Sandwich, and that solved the issue pretty quickly. But I just thought it was weird that they made Duskull spawn rates so uncommon. Either that or I just got unlucky. Anyways, we continue by going back up the mountain to catch 2 Chinglings and 2 Slugmas to fill out that row. For the Chandelure line, it just happens that they were doing this event where it was outbreaks all over the map for Litwick, and they had shiny odds boosted, so I just caught 3 of those, and then after I finished my living dex, I also got me a shiny Litwick. Look at this guy, I'm gonna have me a cool Chandelure in the future, look at him. Anyways, enough on that. let's get to the two lines that took me the longest. The Clefable line and the Milotic line. Okay, so I will concede that with the Clefable line, it was probably my fault and that I probably should have did more research before looking for it. So it starts by me getting that one Clefairy that's in that fixed spawn location. Great. So I look at the survey map and I see there are no more spawn locations for Clefairy or Clefable or Clefla for that matter. So I'm thinking that's fine, I can just use a fairy sandwich and it'll all go good. No. I ran around with the fairy sandwich and not a single one spawned. So I started thinking, I assume maybe because the Clefairy lore is based on the moon and that it comes from space or whatever, that maybe it only spawns at night, to which I decided that I am not traditionally catching this line like I did everything else, because I'm not waiting for nighttime to come, especially when I'm at the peak of the day in the day and night cycle. So we're not doing that. So I took that one Clefairy I got, breeded it down with a Ditto, so I got my two Clefas, friendshipped them up, and then I got my Clefable, and then I let the other one stay a Clefa so I could still have that one, and that was that. The plan when going into this was to catch every Pokemon and to not use Ditto breathing if possible. I knew I probably would have had to use it at some point, but I didn't want to have to use it at all. So this is kind of like a blemish, but it's fine. I still have all of them in my Pokédex and that's fine. Now Milotic. Man, this took too long. So like I said earlier, I had no Pokemon home and my friend wasn't able to play. So just like Politoed, it was time to look through all the raids and keep resetting until one of the raids gave me a Milotic. But there was one key difference this time. The Milotic never showed up. I had to be there for at least 2 hours, legitimately. And I did not find a single Milotic raid, not a single one. So I had to change my plans. I ended up finding a Feebas in one of those raids I was looking for, and I decided that I was just gonna breed it down so I could have a second Feebas and the original Feebas will become the Milotic. I got the Prism scale by completing the Pokédex because you get a lot of rewards from the Pokédex and one of them just happens to be the Prism scale. So after I got the Prism scale, the second Feebas, I just waited for my friend to come home. And so they weren't busy anymore, and I traded the Feebas and trade evolution nonsense. You already know how this works. Honestly, I'm so tired of trade evolutions. I wish they would just go away. Pokemon Legends Arceus did it perfectly. You use the link cable for the Pokemon that don't have trade evolution items, and for the Pokemon that have trade evolution items, they become usable items just like stones. Like for example, Magmortar. You get the Magmarizer, you use it. You don't have to trade with it. You use it, and you have a Magmortar now. Like that's how the Pokemon game should be. We don't need trade evolutions anymore. Like they don't need to exist. They're a relic of the past. But anyways, that's the end of this box. Let's move on to the next box. The final box with all the legendaries and a few stragglers we don't care about. Alright, we made it to the very end. Box 91 through 101. This is the easiest box, but it's because there's only 10 Pokemon. But just because it's the easiest box doesn't mean it didn't take a long time. The first 6 mons were the easiest part. Carbon can be found in abundance by going into this little secret, you can't see the air quotes, I'm doing air quotes, cave at the top of the mountain. So there were no worries there. Duckling and Swanna can be found in this area on the side of the mountain, so they were also pretty easy to find. I'm actually surprised that these two were put so far back in the Pokédex since they aren't particularly strong or special anyway, but whatever I guess. Next up is Cramorant, which we all know I transferred in from home because it's a version exclusive, so we don't really gotta worry about that. And last, before the legendaries, we have Basculin and Basculegion, both of which I found from terror raids across the map because I didn't feel like catching them on my own. Now, let's get to the part where I catch all these legendaries. Okay, so it's not a legendary, but I'm putting Blood Moon here because he's a special encounter that comes from this side quest. So basically, you go to the girl who's just sending up the clan leaders from Legends Arceus, and she tells you about a Pokemon in the forest, so you have to go out with her at night, take some photos of Pokemon in the forest, go through some more dialogue, and do... Excuse me, sorry, I was getting a little bit bored there. Anyways, this side quest is dumb and it's boring, and it took me like 30 minutes, and then Blood Moon shows up and I catch it in a heavy ball because I thought it looked cool. So now let's move on to the 3 evil guys. Monkey Dory was the easiest one for me to catch personally. He got caught in only like 1 ball, which made me believe the other ones would be just as easy to catch, but I was wrong. Looking back on this, I really should use catching power or something because, man, Okidogi took me like 30 minutes, give or take, or like to catch, and I don't know, it was stupid. Also, how do y'all think I should pronounce the name? Like, how is the pronunciation? Is it Okidogi or Okidogi? Leave a comment. Alright, so next we have Pheasantipity, which I'm not lying when I say this, it ended up taking at least an hour and a half. It was so bad that it struggled itself to death and I ended up having to start over. Not only that, but because of how long it was taking, I had to delete a lot of footage because it was just me throwing Pokeballs until it fainted. But eventually I did catch it, and now it can sit in this box, never to be used again. And last but not least, Ogerpon, which isn't getting put in the dex because she's in my party, but just to have the final box picture look good, we're going to temporarily put her in her spot. Okay, now back at my party, we have trainers to bully at Blueberry Academy, and that's the Living Dex. This was pretty satisfying to complete, honestly. Even through the ups and downs and most annoying Pokemon, I can at least look back at my Pokedex and say, hey, I have every single Pokemon in the game, and I think that's pretty cool. It didn't really even take me that long. It only took about like, what, 3 days total if we don't count breaks. Not a full 72 hours, of course. More like 10 hours split across 3 days, give or take. But that's it for the video. I've been Nakruma, and I hope you enjoyed watching my journey to complete the Living Dex. See you next time.